Hello, this is Helen Morrison, and welcome to the fourth Speech Acoustics lecture, Consonants. This lecture is part of a series of lectures that are created for professionals and students who work with children with hearing loss and their families, for parents of children with hearing loss, and with a particular regard for professionals who are preparing for certification as listening and spoken language specialist, as Cert AVTs or Cert AVEds. The series is a series of 5 lectures ranging from describing speech as a complex sound through talking about phonation or the creation of the voice, vowels, consonants, and then finally applying information to the audiogram. If you would like a copy of the slides for this lecture, you can go to the Dropbox address listed on this slide, or you can email me, or you can also email questions or comments to me at helenmcmorrison@gmail.com. There are 3 primary topics in this lecture. There will be a number of subtopics as we go along. First, we're going to talk about aspects and principles of consonant production. We're going to go through acoustic descriptions of consonant types, including perceptual cues. And then finally, as we end the lecture, we'll be pulling together all of the frequency information that's presented in the lecture and mapping that information onto a chart of audiometric frequencies. You're probably accustomed to thinking about consonant productions along the 3 dimensions by which we categorize consonants. Consonants are far more complex than vowels. They're very fast. Some consonants change. We're moving while the speech mechanism is moving while we're creating a consonant. And we describe consonants according to the manner in which they're produced, the place within the vocal tract that a consonant is produced, and whether or not a consonant is accompanied by voicing. You're probably familiar with a chart such as this, where we are placing on the chart consonant place. And in this chart, place ranges from the very front of the vocal tract, where there's occlusion or constriction of the vocal tract at the lips, back to the back of the vocal tract at the glottal area. The manner of consonant production is listed here on the left-hand side, ranging from stop plosives all the way to laterals and glides. And we will be talking about laterals and glides together along with what I also term as semivowels. Now we have our 3rd dimension of consonant production, which is voicing. And you will see that we have pairs of consonants in some of these categories where we have pairs of consonants that have the same place of production and the same manner of production. And we call these pairs of consonants cognates. They are the same on 2 dimensions of consonant production, but they differ on voicing. So we have the p and the b, the t and the d, the ch and the j, the k and the g, and so on. You'll also see that we have some consonants that don't have cognates. These consonants are all produced with voicing. So let's just talk about some general principles of consonant production. Manner of production is created either by a complete closure of the vocal tract, created by a closure of the lips or the tongue, the tongue to the roof of the mouth, the tongue to the teeth, the lips to the teeth, the lips to the lips together. And so one type of manner of production will be this complete closure and release of airflow and sound. There's another type of production where there's a constriction. Sound leaks through, but there is a slight obstruction to sound. So we might have t for a complete closure along the alveolar ridge of the tongue and the alveolar ridge. But if we have a constriction, we might have the voiceless th. And the manner in which there's either closure or constriction is going to determine the consonant sound type. Either there's the sound may be periodic, it may be aperiodic, meaning that there's a transient burst of noise. There could be a turbulent sound, such as that constriction that creates frication. We might have a combination of transience and turbulence. Manner can affect the timing characteristics of a consonant. Some consonants will find are steady state. They don't change over the course of production. Others change over the course of production. And because some consonants change in terms of the frequency characteristics and the nature of the sound over the course of production, it's very hard to assign a single audiometric frequency to that consonant. It depends on where you're listening, at the beginning, at the middle, at the end. So we can't be really black and white when we start thinking about audiometric frequencies, because consonants are highly dynamic, highly changeable. Now, place of consonant production tends to be cued by frequency. And place corresponds to the location of this closure or constriction in the vocal tract. The tongue and the lips are creating this place of articulation, this complete closure or constriction. If you recall, vowel F2, the second formant of the vowel, varies with tongue movement. When the tongue moves forward, F2 is higher. When the tongue moves back to create back vowels, F2 is lower. Something similar happens with consonants. It's a little less predictable, but for example, in consonants that are periodic, where we'll really be paying attention to the formants, the second formant frequency in those formants give us some clues about place of articulation. But there's other ways that the second formant gives us information about place of articulation. We're going to start looking at some spectrograms, and as we see how the vowel transitions into a consonant, and you have the production of the consonant, and then the consonant transitions into a vowel, you see that the vowel formants start to move into the consonant, and then as the vowel is created after we've produced the consonant, you see those formants moving away from the vowel. And we call those movements as the vowel moves in and out of consonants. We call those formant transitions, either from the consonant into the vowel or from a vowel into the consonant, so C to V or V to C. Those F2 transitions can give us some information about place of consonant production. Some of our consonant sounds won't have formants. They'll have noise spikes. They'll have turbulent aperiodic sound. So we won't see formants very clearly. You may see something that looks like a formant on the spectrogram, but what we do see in our aperiodic consonants is some increased intensity in certain ranges, and that increased intensity tends to vary with the placement of the tongue, not clearly predictable like a formant, but in general, if we think about where the tongue is creating constriction or closure, or whether or not the lips way up front are involved, we see that reflected in the second formant. So just like the vowels, the second formant continues to be of importance to us with regard to place of consonant productions. Lip rounding lowers everything for consonants as well as vowels. Now voicing, the difference between p and b, t and d, s and z. Voicing is coded in consonants both by frequency as well as some timing attributes. Now we know that in general the creation of the voice occurs at the vocal folds through vocal fold vibration, and the approximate frequency range that we're assigning to the fundamental frequency of this vocal fold vibration is 250 hertz. It ranges from just below to just above 250 hertz depending upon the age and gender of the speaker. And that fundamental frequency is present in voiced consonants. We'll see it in voiced consonants. But in particular, with regard to some of the aperiodic consonants, we'll also be looking at some timing aspects. And we'll talk about that in much greater detail when we get to that particular kind of consonant, in particular the plosives. But there's also some timing aspects within the production of the consonant that helps the listener know that a consonant is voiced or unvoiced. It's not just hearing the presence of the fundamental frequency. Now, another important thing to know about the voice-voiceless distinction in consonants is that vowels that precede, vowels that come before a consonant, gives the listener a cue as to whether or not that consonant is voiced or unvoiced. So the vowel is shorter before voiceless consonants, hat. The vowel is longer before voiced consonants, had. So just listen, hat, had. There's a measurable longer duration of the vowel in had compared to the vowel in hat. So if you have a listener that doesn't hear consonants very well, if you precede that consonant with a vowel so that you have that duration of the vowel as a cue, you can enhance the accessibility of that consonant. You can help the listener know something about whether or not that consonant is voiced or voiceless. Now, the information that we will be presenting in this lecture comes from a variety of sources. A primary source is the Ling list of speech acoustic cues by audiometric frequency, and that's the copy of the page in the Ling 2002 book, which is in the reference list that's on the left-hand portion of this slide. You see variations of this list in other resources. But this list has a few differences from what appears in other sources of speech science research. And so we're going to supplement this list and also confirm this list with other resources. And I've listed two primary resources that inform the material in this lecture, Borden et al. And Pickett. Those resources are listed in the reference list. It's important to keep in mind, with regard to consonants and vowels, that the frequency information that we describe is not absolute. And even Ling, when you look at his list on the left-hand side of this slide, he says that, for example, certain aspects of speech are available at 250 hertz plus or minus 1 octave. And that plus or minus 1 octave is his way of telling us that because we're starting from phonation and fundamental frequency as the source for all the harmonics that get manipulated in speech sound production, and because that fundamental frequency is going to change, be higher or lower, depending upon the age and gender of the speaker, all of these measures vary. And in general, we can say they vary by about a half octave. In addition, in particular for consonants, they are highly affected by context, so that the transitions in and out of vowels into the consonant that are so important for that second formant transition from vowel into consonant and from consonant into vowel, that second formant transition is going to be different depending upon the place of articulation of the consonant and the particular vowel that is either moving into the consonant or that the consonant is moving into the next vowel. So there's no one number that's perfect. It's important for us to be flexible and to know that we can't have a perfectly memorized list of speech acoustics, but we can adhere to some general principles, and the numbers that we'll be talking about will give us a place to start to create our own roadmap for understanding speech acoustics. The consonant manner types that we're going to talk about are liquids, glides, and semivowels as a single category, nasals, fricatives, plosives and stops, and affricates. And within each consonant manner type, as we proceed, you're going to receive a general description of production and some speech acoustics. Then we're going to take that same information, and you're going to hear it again, but you're going to hear it in a slightly different way as I describe that acoustic information with regard to how that information cues manner, place, and voicing. And then we're actually going to look at the spectrograms of consonants. So you'll have two different kinds of verbal descriptions. You'll have a picture of the consonant, and then at the end we'll pull it together, all the information together with regard to audiometric frequencies. So let's look at our semivowels, liquids, glides, and semivowels, wa, ya, ra, and la. And the production of these semivowels, liquids, and glides, they're produced as though they are very quickly changing diphthongs. Wa, ra, ya, la. They're very quickly changing diphthongs, and if you remember, diphthongs are formants that change over the course of the production of the vowel. These are formants that change over the production of the consonant, but they're really fast. And the jaw and the tongue are both moving, and similar to vowels, the jaw is associated with F1 changes over the course of the consonant production, and the tongue movement is associated with F2. The sound type of these consonants is periodic. You could sing a song on any one of these consonants. This means that the frequency content is highly predictable, that it's comprised of formants. We know that the formants change over time, so it's not a steady state sound, it's a changeable sound. Semivowels, glides, and liquids are all voiced, meaning that the fundamental frequency, we're going to say for our purposes, averages around 250 hertz. Let's talk a little bit more specifically about the acoustic characteristics. In general, the first formant of this group of consonants is around 500 hertz, varies from speaker to speaker. The second formant is around 1,000 hertz. Now, what's really interesting about this group of consonants is that the R and the la are differentiated not by the second formant, but by the third formant. It's very fine differences in tongue tip adjustments that differentiate the production of the r and the la, the very tip end of the tongue. And that movement is reflected in the third formant of these consonants. And this third formant is centered around 2000 hertz across speakers. Let's take the same information and now divide it up into these three dimensions of consonant production: manner, place, and voicing. So the manner of production of that semivowels, glides, and laterals is that it's a consonant that's produced by very swiftly changing formants, mostly F1 and F2, F1 at 500 hertz, F2 at 1000 hertz. Place is generally determined by F2 with the exception of the r and la. So the labial, if we think about the three primary places of production for most consonants, labial, moving at the front, moving back to alveolar, and then even further back to palatal. The labial w, made with pursing of the lips. The F2 transitions upward. You'll hear that formant moving from a lower frequency to a higher frequency. I'm not going to give you the exact numbers because it's going to vary with regard to the vowel context. Now the alveolar position, the r and the la, because it's the tongue tip at that alveolar place of articulation that's changing these two consonants, it's F3 in these consonants that determines what the place of articulation is, that signal us what the place of articulation is, and that's around 2000 hertz. The r has more movement than the la. And then finally, the palatal ya is, we're looking back again at second formant information, and it moves down. And we'll see this on the spectrogram. I'm going to summarize. Labial w, F2, around 1000 hertz, moves up in frequency. Alveolar, r and la. F3 at around 2000 hertz, with r having more movement of F3. Moving back, the palatal ya is an F2 movement, F2 being around 1000 hertz, and it moves down. All of these consonants are voiced, so voicing is signaled by the fundamental frequency at approximately 250 hertz. So let's look at some glides, laterals, semivowels. We have lead, red, wed, and gel. And I've just put a dotted line to separate the quickly changing formants for the consonant from the steady state vowel. So we have lead, red, wed, gel. And we have here, if we look at the la and the ra, I'm going to get the pen out so we can just look at some things. Here is F3, and you'll see it's actually, for this speaker, it's higher than 2000 hertz. And here is F3 for the ra, going up like this. You see there's a lot more movement for the ra than for the la in the second formant. And in fact, the second formant for the ra, I'm sorry, for the third formant. So third formant is fairly flat in the la, moves quite a bit for the ra, and actually it mimics the second formant here. Let's look at the second formant for the wa. You see that it moves upward, crossing 1,000 hertz. And the second formant for the ya moves downward to the vowel. And it's a little bit higher than what we just quoted in our list of acoustic characteristics because it varies with speaker. Primary information, formants move quickly in laterals, glides, and semivowels. F3 at around 2,000 hertz is important for the ra-la differentiation.